that we're doing something major, something's
Yeah,
happening, you know.
but I just found out that 5 seconds is not enough to take a sip of tea. So today I learned
We're all
something.
learning. We're all learning here today. Like we'll be learning from you on content strategy and content systems, and you're learning just the finer points of sipping tea. Cool. I'm gonna give that a few seconds, just checking out that we're live and everything's working. I see YouTube is live. I see we have a few people that are already watching. Hi, guys. You can leave a comment in the chat so we know that this is working, you know. And I also see we're live on LinkedIn as well. So everything seems to be up and running and ready for us to dive into content systems and content strategy. Yeah, I wanted to say real quick at the start while we are still sort of getting about that this was the easiest session for me to plan and set up because I didn't have to switch between different time zones all the time as we were preparing
Yeah.
because both me and Adriana are in the same time zone and that's a very big rarity over here.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Hey, neighbor.
So this is pretty cool. So yeah, first off, Adriana, thanks again for doing this. I'm super excited. I've mentioned this a few times online the previous few days, but I'm gonna say it again. Um, Being always the person who's saying like, yeah, but what's the strategy? Yeah, but what's the long-term plan? This gets very tiring very fast. And I love the fact that when I first discovered you online, when we first met, I found like a kindred spirit. And I saw someone
Ah,
else who's always harping on strategy. So I'm super excited to dive into this with someone who's definitely in the same club as I am. Let's call it.
same. This is why it was such an easy yes. When you asked me if I wanted to do this live session, I was yes, yes, please, because I feel like what we're doing, harping on and on about strategy and the long game and the long-term plan, is actually us being the voice of reason, and it's common sense, or it should be common sense, but it's not, and people sort of treat it like a hot take. I mean, how is this a hot take?
Yeah, exactly. And you definitely have the experience and the expertise to back all of this up. So I think that that's important. And speaking of background and expertise and why we are so bullish on strategy, I wanted us to start today with a short sort of setting up of the context and the general sort of challenges that we're seeing in the market with clients that both you and I work with. And I think that the best place to start will be to talk a little bit about the recent research report that you created called The State of Solopreneurship. And I think you have like great stats there to share about the problems that content creators are facing. And I know a lot of the audience here is part of that solopreneur crowd and people who are creating content independently. But there's also quite a few people who are part of companies and working for corporate brands. And I have to say that looking at the insights from your report, I was all the time I was thinking this is exactly the same type of problems that I hear from my clients who are in-house marketers in businesses or working in agencies with corporate clients. And I think that what you're about to share applies to all of us, no matter whose content we are actually creating.
Yeah, definitely. I'm gonna drop a link in the chat here for people who haven't seen the report, for them to download it because we won't have the time to go through it all. I'm just going to start by saying that I started putting together this report. I don't know what I was thinking. It took over 100 hours, and I had no help. But I started it out of rage because everything you see online on social media or even mainstream media is just the success stories, the people who make six figures a month, if not a year, and they got there in 3 months or less. But I knew from my clients and from my friends that that was utter bullshit. And let me share my screen real quick. so you guys can see the actual numbers. Um, so this is the first stat that blew my mind. How much money solopreneurs actually make. If you add up the numbers, you'll see that it's only 33% of them who make over 100K a year. And we even have people who make less than 10K a year. What's interesting about this cohort is that there are people who are both on my email list, but also in private communities that I'm in on social media. A lot of people have been generous enough to share my surveys, so I kind of broke free from my own bubble. So I got data from a bunch of communities and a bunch of different bubbles, and I found it very interesting how different the areas of focus are and how people make their money. Um, for example, let's look real quick uh, um, at what is the primary revenue for people, and you'll see that most of them do not rely on products, on digital products, what we usually see as the goose with the golden eggs for the majority of their revenue. Like they do have digital products, but most of the revenue comes from services. And I think this is even more important now in the era of AI. People will always pay more for done for you or done with you consulting or advisory than they will for you to teach them how to do it, especially if we're talking about self-paced courses or PDFs or anything like that. And I don't know if you got a chance to see the biggest struggles of this cohort center around list growth. People know that the money's in the list, and we're going to talk about that later on. But also time and creative bandwidth. People struggle with time, and I see this happening with my clients at all stages of business. They feel like it's gotten harder and harder to push through the AI slop, through the social media algorithm changes. It's gotten harder to get people to sign up for your list, and so people feel like they need to be chronically online, which is honestly disheartening because we all have limited time and we cannot afford to be online 24/7. And even if you're not a solopreneur, even if you have a content team, a social media team, you know that everything has its limits. Like budgets aren't infinite. You don't have 100+ people working on the same thing, and so on.
Yeah, I think that this is definitely the sort of highlight stat that I was talking about when we were starting, that seeing this focus on like limited time, limited creative bandwidth, limited resources, if you will, if we're talking about available marketing budget, especially in content marketing. We know that currently it's a situation where a lot of stuff is getting put on hold, and we don't have access to the full scope of resources that we'd like to, even if we're working within a larger team in a company. And I think that this is sort of a very nice way to set the stage for what we are about to talk about now in terms of content systems, because the less time and the less bandwidth and the less resources you have, the more there's an impetus to use these resources wisely. So when we're saying we don't have the time, we don't have the budget, we don't have the bandwidth, then the answer is get better at strategically choosing what to spend your limited resources on. And this is exactly where a content system can prove super, super helpful. So I want to sort of move into that now, and I think that we'll be spending a lot of time talking about content systems. So the majority of this session, and I know that I'm so curious to dive deeper into your way of building content systems. So I want to stop here for a second to pause and to remind people who are viewing this live now, uh, boys and girls, be ready to ask your questions. You can drop them in the chat. We'll surface them as we go along, either contextually as we're talking with Adriana, or later at the end of the session where we have planned ample time for Q&A. So make sure you ask your questions so we can direct this discussion in a way that's most useful to all of you watching us live. After all, you're here for that reason. You can direct us almost as you remember that game of Sims where you were like the one leading the characters. That's what will be today for everyone watching. Yeah, so let's talk about content systems, and how do you think about like, in your opinion, what's a content system? How do you set this up for in your work and with your clients?
It starts with a slight change in mindset. People usually see content as a sidekick, as something that helps your products move along the market, something that helps you sell. And that's sort of true, but I feel that if your time is limited, you should start by treating content as a product. So if we follow that analogy, you see that when you build a product, your first thought is, how do I get as many eyes as possible on that product so that I can make more sales? The same can be true about content. You have limited time, and let's be honest, you have limited ideas. You can't be brilliant every day, 4 times a day, to feed those insatiable algorithms everywhere. And I think even creating a ton of content, even if it's not bad or mediocre, might do you a disservice because it will only dilute your ideas. Whereas if you change your mindset to treating content as a product, you make sure that you get as much mileage out of every piece of content as possible. So you don't have to come up with new ideas, new strategies, new frameworks every single week. You just have to come up with new distribution methods and new ways of saying the same thing. There are two big ideas that I use to build content systems, both for myself and for my clients. And first, it's the fact that distribution is always more important than creation. And it pains me to say that. I used to run a digital marketing agency that focused mostly on content creation. And we writers tend to get high on our own supply and say that, hey, if you have a really good piece of content, it's going to break the internet, it's going to go viral. But we know that's not true. Every brilliant piece of content needs a bit of help on its journey to fame. And secondarily, if you're starting to get bored with your own ideas, with your own frameworks, you're only beginning to make a dent in what people know about you. Until your audience cannot repeat your ideas back to you, you haven't said them often enough. And I know that especially for creative types, this is a really big struggle because you want to be seen as someone who's at the forefront of your industry, someone who always has something new and exciting and interesting to say. But the truth is that people don't give a crap about your content unless it helps them. Most of the times they're just scrolling past it. You're competing with not just with your direct competitors, you're competing with everything that's online, from cat videos to fail videos, and yes, to your direct competitors. So you can bet that even those who have read or consumed your content in any format a month ago, they've already forgotten about it. We remember it, we know what it's about, they don't. So by repeating or repurposing your ideas as often as possible, you're doing a service both to yourself and to your business, as well as to your audience.
Yeah, that's definitely a great point. This whole point of repetition is always the hardest thing to grasp at the start because you're just so invested in what you're creating and you remember every word and every sentence, and it's very hard to get out of your own head almost and figure out that someone who's just reading that somewhere online isn't really paying as much attention as we are to our own content. And one thing
Obviously.
that I remember about distribution that's sort of a very, very cool stat was that there was one of the Content Marketing Institute's State of Content Marketing reports a few years back. There was an eye-opening stat on the list there, which was showing that the for content marketers who were feeling that their content was underperforming, one of the biggest, I think the second biggest issue that they were seeing was that they were not investing enough attention and time and effort in distribution. And frankly, this is it pains me to say as well, but it's oftentimes way more important than painstakingly crafting an idea that's brilliant and amazing and so on. If that idea is great, but it never reaches the people that it's aimed at, as they say, is it actually making any noise? Like, is it actually getting to these people? And the answer is more often than not, no.
Yep. And I mean, you can create the best content there is on any given topic, but if no one gets to see it and share it and talk about it, it will only be the world's best kept secret.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, so we're building that content system on repetition, repeating key messages that we've surfaced that are important to us, and then we're also paying very high attention on distribution. And this is sort of like the bedrock from a, let's say, philosophical point of view, like from a mindset point of view. So, how do you go about building that content system? Can you take us through the process, starting at like ideation, figuring out what we're talking about, and then building this step by step as a process?
Okay, sure. Do you have 2 hours? So, um, I'm going to start at goals because this is what I see
Yeah.
lacking in most of my clients' content strategies. They have these pretty Notion boards or even spreadsheets that are keenly color coded and they look great. But when I ask, why did you publish this? Very few people have an answer, or better yet, very few people have an answer that's tied to their business goals. My take is to make sure that everything you publish is related to a business goal of yours. For instance, your business goal may be a launch. Let's say that you're launching something in February. Starting now, everything you publish should be built to persuade people that they need that thing. This is Cialdini's word, persuasion. It's something that you do before you have an actual offer, but you know what the offer is going to be about, and you need to instill in your audience's minds that they need that thing. For instance, when I launched the profitable content engine masterclass where I explained the system and how to build it, for 2 months before that, I talked to people about content, how to build it, how to make sure it's profitable, whether or not you should use AI to create it or to ideate, and so on. So I think this is the best place to come up with ideas for your content. But if we backtrack things a little bit, your ideas for new offers and new products should always be rooted in your audience's needs. For instance, I built a masterclass on content because many of my strategy clients complained about how long it takes to build content, and when they do, that content doesn't convert. So I figured, hey, this is something I should be teaching people at scale, not just in one-on-one sessions. Another way to come up with great ideas for your content is to pay attention. And I know this sounds rudimentary and basic, but the 101 is always foolproof. For instance, I have a spreadsheet that I use after every call, whether it's a Zoom coffee with a peer or a strategy session with a client. I spend 5 minutes after that call and I write down every question or every complaint I got. And it's not a fun process, I'll admit it, but after a while you start to spot patterns. You start to see people asking the same questions or asking questions about the same challenge and the same hurdle. And within months, depending on how many people you talk to, you will have ideas for new pieces of content. And in turn, if those pieces of content resonate, you can build products or offers or services around them because you know it's a common pain in your audience. And you essentially have buyers who are primed to spend money on solving that issue. So this covers the ideation part. It also ties your content to business goals because no one likes random acts of content. Um, and the next step is distribution. Um, I know, Vasi, you have your own distribution system, and I'd be very curious to hear about it. I'm just going to get us started by saying that the easiest way to enhance the distribution of every piece of content that you create is to find similar platforms, and you can group them by format. For instance, I'm a writer at heart. I write like a speed demon on Adderall, so I want to make sure that every piece of content that I create gets published on multiple platforms. It always starts as a newsletter. This is where most of my content lives, and I know I'm subjective, but this is where my best content lives, or at least the content I put the most effort in. After that, it gets repurposed as is as a blog on my website. This helps with both SEO, but also with interlinking and with me spending less time on future pieces. Because if I explained the concept in a previous issue, I could just link back to it rather than waste space explaining it again and again. From there on, I syndicate to Medium because Medium acts as a discovery engine for me, and it also brings in a little bit of revenue. Medium's not going to make you rich, but it's not nothing either. And then I chop it up into social media posts that I publish across all my social media networks. And after 3 to 6 months, depending on my business goals at the time, I may republish a piece or two. So this is me. But for instance, if you spend more time doing YouTube, you can simply chop up parts of those videos and use them as shorts, even as TikToks or Instagram Reels. You can use the transcripts to create newsletters, blogs, solo podcasts. If you have audio and video, really the world is your oyster.
Yeah, I think that I'm definitely very similar to where you're at in terms of process and channels of choice, because me as well, I'm a person who loves to write, so all the text-based channels are a natural fit for me. One thing that I'm currently playing around with still in my mind, but it's probably gonna be a focus for me going into 2026, is to start paying more attention back to my blog, because I used to write really long, very detailed, deep dive pieces on specific parts of the process that in the end came into play with my customers as an audience, and they are like everything I used to write before is now part of the whole tool stack that I use when working with clients. And I was just thinking that the newsletter is a great place to create thought leadership type of content. But in order for me to have like 3, 4, 5,000 word piece as I used to, I need to have it in like a blog. And then maybe this can then become a couple of newsletter editions, which can then in turn become each edition a couple of social media posts and so on and so forth. But yeah, in terms of process, that's very similar. So I'm wondering, like, if you were not a newsletter person, like, if you were in a different frame of mind, do you think that you would be mostly focused on something like an audio format, like a podcast or video series? Like, where's your head at? Just as a thought experiment.
Yes. Actually, I feel like writing has been my way of hiding behind the keyboard. I started writing when I was 5 years old and I never stopped. I really enjoy it. And I've been hiding away from video because, as you know, it's much more work than writing. You have to turn on the camera, the lights, show up, be there for a determined duration. But um, it's not easy for me to admit this. I think that in the era of AI, you have to show your face, you have to show up on video. I've had countless people who are subscribers to my newsletter, and they've been on my list for years. And when they first saw me on video, they said, "Wow, I really love this because now when I read your newsletter, I can do it in your own voice." And this fosters a sort of a different connection, a deeper connection with your audience. And it goes well beyond what you can do in one on one calls, whether they're Zoom coffees or consulting calls. So, yes, I would probably go deeper on video. I plan to do this. But I would also make sure that I have a place of my own, a corner of the internet that I can control, that it's not mediated by any algorithm. So while the newsletter space is super crowded and it's getting more and more crowded by the minute, and it's gotten harder to get into people's inboxes rather than their spam folders or their promotions folder, I'm still bullish on email marketing, not necessarily newsletters, because it's the only way other than SMS marketing that I know where you can easily segment your audience, where you can reach people with more ease. Even if the rules of the inbox have changed, it's still easier to get to your subscribers than it is to get to your social media followers.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I have to say, like, the newsletter, especially in terms of commercial potential, for me still is the best sort of marketing channel. And again, I'm talking both about my own personal perspective as a content creator and a solo consultant. And I also see it working really nicely for a lot of my clients, especially those in B2B where we have a longer sales cycle, where we need to show up in front of these same people again and again and stay top of mind with new interesting content. Having a newsletter that's a strong resource for your brand is probably the best bit of marketing investment that you can make in B2B right now. And I can sort of, sign this in a public statement or something, because I hear a lot of people talking about like video and webinars and so on and so forth, but I still feel that the simpler formats and the ones that take you straight to the person where whenever you want to be there in front of them, is probably the best bit to work on and to focus on.
Absolutely. And marketing wise and sales wise, it's still an extraordinary channel, even though it's old. Like 80% of my clients tell me, "Hey, I found you on social media, but bought from you because of your newsletter." Because on social media, there's no room for nuance. People simply skim the scroll. And of course, they can skim your newsletter, but you can fake it for a two-liner post on social media. You can't fake it for a few hundred or even thousand words, and behind the statement from my clients lies the fact that they can see I actually am an expert because of how I write. It's not just me posturing and showing my rented Lamborghini on social media and telling them, "Hey, I'm super rich, I can teach you how to be rich as well."
Yeah. I think that also answers. I see on LinkedIn we had a question. Do you see text being replaced by video content now? I guess you're still bullish on text, as am I, for a very good reason. But I do agree with you on one point that with AI getting bigger and bigger, and we seeing this first like wave of it, taking over written content, I feel that the more human we can sort of the more we can show up in human ways in front of people, the more long lasting a relationship we're building in with them. So in that sense, I do agree that video now has a stronger point with that sort of signal of humanity that it can bring, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think that that text is going away anytime soon.
And also, pretty much any video starts with text. Like our video
True.
here started in a Google Doc, and where we went back and forth on ideas on what to talk about. And if you have a script for your videos, that's probably going to be text.
Yeah. So I really want to dive deeper into different content formats and especially newsletters, but I wanted to touch on a few ideas that you've shared before in your newsletter that I think are important to sort of surface. One of the things that I was looking at as we were preparing for this talk was that idea of resonance and building content system not for individual hack spikes, but for building up that repository of trust building assets and getting those signals and that social proof that sort of creates trust in your audience. So can you sort of dive a little bit deeper into how do you define resonance? How do we look for these signals, and how do we sort of do the work to get more of them, if you will?
Yeah. So let me first drop a link. This is actually my manifesto and um, the reasoning behind what I do. Um, and the formula for what I call the resonance principle is signal times substance time squared. And in my formula, time is squared because compounding isn't linear. I know this sounds a bit abstract, so I'm going to dive deeper into it. I talk about signals as values, if you will, even though it's not my favorite word, as having your own foothold, the flag you want to plant, the hill you're willing to die on. For instance, for me, it's a strategy beats hacks and mindless bro hype every minute, every day. This is the hill I'm willing to die on. Then there's the substance. What are you actually teaching? What are you offering to your clients, to your buyers? What can you help them do? Like without the hype, without the I'll help you make 10K a month by working 10 minutes a day. Like super honest. And then time, which is squared because these things don't happen overnight. I don't remember who said it, but I know that, everyone wants to be confident. They want to be confident on camera. They want to be confident when they share an offer, because projecting confidence sort of makes you more trustworthy. And obviously, people are interested in speeding up because no one's confident in the beginning. And I remember someone saying that, if you try to speed up confidence, that's arrogance. That's not confidence, and this has to be earned, and it takes time. And all of these things together, they build what I call resonance. It's, if you will, a high yield bond where every fulfilled promise adds a sliver of principle, and it sort of builds itself like a snowball that once it has reached critical mass, you can see new opportunities coming your way. People asking for you to be on their podcast, Stripe notifications, and all of that. The only downside, if you will, to building resonance is that it takes a ton of time. In the beginning, it sounds like you're screaming into the void. No one's following you. No one's replying to your newsletters. Meanwhile, the people who scream inane things in a mic on social media, they also have those nice pictures of rented Lamborghinis and pools and all that. And you want to speed things up. I I think my favorite example here, or my favorite distinction, is between Esther Perel, the psychologist, and Andrew Tate, the, I don't know how to classify him,
The
the
joke.
the jock. Right. So, if you look at what Esther Perel does, she built her business during decades of practice um, in her psychology practice, and now she is the North Star, the voice on modern relationships. Whereas Andrew Tate rose to fame very quickly, but he is essentially toxic to mainstream brands. Very few people are going to ask him to speak at a conference. Uh, Whereas Esther Perel's talks are sold out within minutes, and pretty much any brand would want to work with her. I think what they do have in common, and I hope Esther Perel is not listening to this because I'm liking her to Andrew Tate, is that they both had a big idea, something that wasn't mainstream, something that was a bit challenging to accept. I think Esther Perel's most famous idea is that infidelity doesn't have to mean the end of a marriage or a relationship, whereas Andrew Tate spoke about the Matrix and all that lovely stuff and all the misogyny that I really, really do not want to. I don't want to repeat, and yeah, this is what they have in common. By the way they build their businesses and the way they show up as authorities in their respective fields is very, very different. And another counterexample here is Elizabeth Holmes. I'm sure most of you remember it from Thanos. She started out as this rock star who's going to revolutionize the health industry and ended up in jail. So yeah, I'd be a bit wary of super fast rises to fame.
I think that's an interesting sort of distinction there, especially the Esther Perel versus Andrew Tate example, because um, it's almost like where Esther Perel is talking about, like, you need to invest time and work on long-term relationships, and she doesn't promise you quick wins, whereas Andrew Tate is like, yeah, just follow these steps and you will have every woman you ever wanted in life. It's also
And
like,
money, tons of
yeah, and
money.
all of it, all of it. So I think it's also about not just the speed with which they grow as brands, if we take them as that, but it's more about the over promising of results that one has and the other doesn't. But I guess here comes from the point of view of a marketer and someone working to sort of elevate the brand. It's also the question of, okay, but if I'm not over promising results and I'm not telling people, hey, here's a quick and easy way to reach X, they're not going to be paying attention to me. So how would you approach that if a client comes to you saying something of that matter? Like, what's your counter argument? How do we fight that?
I asked myself the same question when I started Strategic AF, my newsletter. I wondered who in hell is going to have the patience to read all this and accept that it's going to take time and that I cannot guarantee results. Because as a strategist, I can't tell you, buy a strategy session with me today and you're going to be rich tomorrow. But my bet was on people who have tried the hacks and the grand promises, and they've been disappointed and made poorer by the bros who sold them that. And my bet was that there are plenty of those people. And I was right. Most of my clients have tried the quick fixes, the 1 hour courses that promise to make you rich, and so on. And I think that's true in most industries. The fitness industry is a good example here. Like, you can drink this tea; it's super easy. Just drink this tea, and you're going to lose half your weight in 10 days. And if you're desperate enough, you're going to try it. But after seeing what it does to your body, you're probably going to want to take things slow, talk to a doctor, talk to an actual trainer who has experience in this field, and and so on. So, believe it or not, there are still reasonable people out there who understand that business is hard. And I'm talking strictly from a B2B point of view here. But just like there are people who are willing to cook their own meals from scratch rather than order fast food every day, there will be people who accept that the things worth fighting for might take time. And this is a personal belief, but I believe that this is true in both business and personal life.
Yeah, that's a good point. And again, one of those hot takes that shouldn't be a hot take, like having people who have patience is one of those, and reaching them. Yeah. So now that like, cause up till now we've been talking about a lot about like what's behind that content system that you're building. What are the types of messages that you will be showing? How to devise a plan where you're building on top of that resonance that you were talking about, and how do you show up consistently to build that resonance? Now I want to dive a little bit in the different types of content that we can be creating. So, what's the high leverage content, and how do you think about when you're working with a client? How do you together decide what types of content to focus on?
First and foremost, it depends on their business goals. As I said a bit earlier, I want to ask them, hey, is there something you're launching? Or is there a current offer that you want to push more of? Because I hate to go against what my favorite writer, Oscar Wilde, said. But this is not art for art's sake. We create content for business purposes. So every piece of content that we put out there should have a goal. So if I were planning to launch my masterclass on content again, I would start by writing about content, obviously. But the format and the way you frame things also matter, and I think that's actually the root of your question, because the persuasion content I've been talking about tells people that they need that, but you still need to convince them that you're the person to buy that from, and also you need to convince them that they can do it, like that it's easy enough for them, it's affordable enough for them, that they have the resources to do it. And I'm not saying do motivational posts like just make a wish and the universe will conspire to make it happen, but I'm saying empower people, show them that it's doable. So typically, most of your content, the kind that's evergreen and the kind that generates Stripe notifications, falls into four-ish categories. You have the point of view content, which is your why. It's the thing that reframes the way your audience sees a problem. This is about belief shifts. If people believe that they don't have enough time to create content, I'm going to create a POV piece of content that shows them there is a system behind building profitable content, and that system is worth trying, and that it's not going to take them months to master it. But this kind of POV is also philosophy in a way. It talks about your values, what you stand for, and it kind of gets people to rally behind you, because people rarely rally behind ideas, they rally behind beliefs. So in my case, I would tell people that I can teach you how to do profitable content that aligns with your business goals, without having to spend 20 hours a week churning out content because you don't have Alex Hormoz's team, right? Then the type of content that you need to get people to buy from you, not from someone else, is evidence content. This is social proof, testimonials. These are the lowest hanging fruit, if you will. But there's also another type of evidence content that I feel most people underuse. These are deep dives into how you do things. For example, after I launch something, I usually do a deep dive and I tell people, here's how I thought about this launch, here's how I thought about pricing, here's what worked, here's where I messed up, and this kind of transparency acts as a character testimonial, if you will. It tells people if they would want to work with you or if they're better off with someone else. Then you have your method content. This is your, if point of view content was your why, this is your how. This is the methodology. This is me telling you, here's how I help you make money. These are the steps that you need to take. And also, and very importantly, this is not for you if. All of my landing pages have a section that tell people do not buy this if. And usually, I mean, always that section is not don't buy this if you want to stay poor. It's not motivational drivel. It's me actually pre-qualifying people and telling them that, hey, this is not for everyone. It's not for you if, for instance, you have a sterner tone of voice or you work for this type of brand and so on and so forth. And lastly, I would say that this is maybe my least favorite type of content, but I admit that I need to get better at it. This is the human content, the kind where you talk about yourself, about your own failures, where you step away from teaching because constant teaching can be exhausting both for you and your audience. And you step into here's what I learned the hard way. I think this is the most difficult, the hardest type of content to nail because it's a fine balance between honestly talking about your shortcomings and turning everything into performative vulnerability or becoming a personal brand cliche and so on.
Yeah, that's very big currently on LinkedIn, especially. I was talking to a friend
Yeah.
yesterday, and he's just at the point where he wants to start creating more content and being more visible because he's planning a career transition in about a year's time, and he knows that he needs time to build up that attention. And he's been sort of being more actively on LinkedIn this past couple of weeks, and he wrote to me yesterday saying, oh Jesus, like LinkedIn is just like Facebook is currently for me. Like just looking at the content, it's very much like here's my kid and you know what I learned from him about B2B sales and so on.
Yeah, and trauma dumping and all that stuff. Yep.
Yeah.
This is actually what I'm writing about in tomorrow's newsletter. How we marketers we ruin everything, and the last thing we ruined was authenticity because everyone now feels like they have to turn their divorce into a three-part arc and talk about it in excruciating detail on LinkedIn. And I'm not opposed to that. If this is what you want to do, go ahead and do it. But I know that many of my clients, for instance, they don't want to talk about their dog's digestive problems just to get clients for their B2B business. They want to talk about what makes them experts, you know?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I like the mix of different content types that you were talking about. One thing that immediately sort of comes to mind when I'm looking at these four types is that this is all of it. It's evergreen content, so it's content that's designed to serve you in the long run, which is sort of the basis of a proper content system. Like you don't want to just create one hit wonders every day. You have more important work to do, so you need to be spending time wisely in choosing what type of content to create. And I think that evergreen content is the exact thing that you need in these situations. And the
And yeah,
other yeah the other thing that strikes me with these four types is that you're going through the uh, both the personal conviction, so the value oriented and why oriented element. You're going through the specifics and the how with method content, and you're going through the proving that this works with the content that's showing testimonials and other kinds of social proof. So it's sort of covering all your bases, and the human content is sort of the cherry on top, which is adding, especially for individual creators or for founder brands. If you're working as a founder promoting your startup, this is what's creating that sense of, oh, I actually know this person. It's not just someone who's holding me at an arm's length, but it's someone who's giving me a true to form look behind the scenes, and they're not just being all like polished and just standing there at the distance. They're close enough for me to actually have a true life connection with. And all of these components are sort of part of the uh, be it conscious or unconscious process of us making decisions on who to spend time with and who to hire as an individual or as a corporate brand, because it works for both of these, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I see this rise in even for corporate brands, they do tend to push people forward much more than they used to. You see it on LinkedIn where um, employees post stuff about the brand that they work for, and also there are more and more founder-led brands out there, and uh, more CEOs who go out there. They do the talks, they show up on YouTube, they do the podcasts and all that, all in an effort to humanize the brands that used to seem faceless corporate companies.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to sort of move us to distribution and repurposing as that final sort of pillar in our content system. And we mentioned obviously like needs to be as big of a part of your content system as creating that original content. So do you want to take us through like a general sort of high level overview of proper distribution practices, direction, do's and don'ts, whatever you feel is most important to succeed in distribution in the current sort of social media and other channel situation that we're currently in?
Mm, yes. So, I think we touched on this briefly when I talked about the life cycle for every piece of content that I create, how it starts on my newsletter and then gets syndicated across the board and repurposed into blog posts and social media posts. I feel like if you start with an evergreen piece of content, then you kind of start to spot where it belongs, and this is very meta. But if you look at our chat today, it's essentially based on content that both of us have created in the past. Like, there isn't anything new. We haven't created anything new. We just brought it together in a different format. We brought together multiple pieces of content, both from my own library and from yours. And I think this is a very much overlooked kind of distribution, because you feel like you show up in an interview or on a podcast and you have to say something that's completely new and revolutionary, whereas your best ideas are still gathering dust in an archive somewhere. And for best practices, another thing that's very overlooked is still guest posting. If you're creating written content, this is how I built my first business, and this is what I'm starting to do with this business as well. Finding media outlets that I could write for, because everyone's looking, even today in the era of AI, everyone's looking for good content, for content that stands out, for stuff that isn't AI slop. And I don't know if this answers your question, because I feel like I've strayed far away from it.
So, to sort of bring this back to a bit of a more practical sort of direction, I think everything you said is definitely valid, especially considering like how much attention we're paying to creating new stuff, and how much attention we're actually paying to smartly reusing existing stuff. But I know that for a lot of people it's difficult to start on that journey. So if you haven't like really approached distribution and repurposing in a mindful way, how should you go about that? So the first thing that comes to mind is, when do you actually plan this? Do you start, and you can speak from personal experience or give us examples from client projects, like do you plan distribution and repurposing at the start when you're first thinking about the piece? Do you first need to see what you've actually created in order to know where it would fit in the different channels where you're distributing ideas? Like, how can you sort of give us the most common scenario of a step by step there?
So, depending on the stage of the business that you're in, I would start with with an inventory. So, if you've been in business for say 3 months or more, you already have a library of content. It may not be huge, but you have stuff there, and that inventory should already tell you what can be repurposed, because 3 months is a long enough time spell for you to resurface some of your ideas and some of your pieces of content, and you can start analyzing what worked, what failed, what resonated, what people hated, because maybe you have data on that, and then you'll know what to repurpose, what to distribute elsewhere, and so on. For instance, you can use AI to reformat and repurpose some of your pieces of content and syndicate them to third party publications. As for when you start thinking about distribution and repurposing in the life cycle of a specific piece, again, I would go for the business goal itself, because some pieces of content may be designed to build an audience, and then you want as much mileage and as many eyes as possible on them. And then you might think of, hey, I'm going to write this piece as a newsletter, but also in a way that's easy to repurpose for other media outlets. Or you may write it to sell a product or to persuade someone that they need a product, in which case you kind of drop the audience growth from the mix and you focus on making it as compelling as possible to your existing audience. So it all ties back to the business goal that you start with, and to the content goal, because largely speaking, any piece of content that you publish uh, can have um, can have a couple of goals, like to sell something directly. I built this, buy it. To generate leads. I'm very good at what I do. Hop on this email list, and when you're ready, you're going to buy. To entertain, again, because constantly lecturing people is exhausting, or simply to grow your audience, because I've gotten a lot of pushback on this. A couple of years ago, I launched a course on how to grow an audience online without spending 40 hours a week on it. And a ton of people told me that you don't need a big audience. It looks like everyone knows someone who has 200 Instagram followers and they're filthy rich. And my usual answer to that was, imagine if they had 2,000 or 20,000. The truth is that whatever you're selling, whether you're a solopreneur or working for a corporate brand, at some point you are going to reach the end of your audience. Everyone in your current audience will have either bought from you or decided that they will never buy from you. They're just there for the free content. This is why you permanently need new people in your audience, because everything decays with time, marketing channels, audiences, and so on. So assigning the pure goal of audience building to a piece of content uh, is absolutely the right thing to do. And you'll see that typically these are the hot takes you see on social media, or the spicier pieces, or collaborating with various creators so that you can tap into their audience. And yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff you can do there, but it all takes time.
Yeah, yeah, it does. But at the same time, that's That's sort of the silver lining, because if it was easy, like everyone would be doing it, and we won't have a way to stand out from others. So as long as we
Yeah.
are mindful about it and we're doing it the right way, then we can still have access to success, as they say. So you when you mentioned audience growth, and when you we were talking now about distribution, this is always the moment in time where I start thinking about social media platforms and being visible on social media. And we have been trying to purposefully keep this conversation a bit sort of content type agnostic, if you will, like not giving prescriptive direction. But I think that this is a question on everyone's mind. Like, if I'm building on social media and then I'm also trying to um, solve for that tension where this is the easiest place where you can grow an audience, but at the same time, it's a place where you're constantly battling an algorithm, which almost feels hostile at a certain point in time. So how do you sort of think about visibility and audience growth in a way that sort of working with the way algorithms are surfacing content without making you constantly try to stay on that hamster wheel and try to just churn out new stuff just to please an algorithm?
Mm. I think about it in loops.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, obviously, the most valuable thing you can do on social media is to deplatform people and move and move them to a platform that you control. This is why I'm very obnoxious about my newsletter on social media. We've already said that it's also email marketing is also the best channel to sell, typically in most industries. But there is something to be said about having a large social media audience as well. First and foremost, it's social proof, whether we like it or not. I remember a year ago or so, I discovered a new to me LinkedIn creator, and I was talking to a couple of friends of mine in different Zoom coffees, and I told them, "Hey, do you know this person?" And because they were both chronically on LinkedIn, their first impulse was to say, no, and to sort of feel bored, like if I don't know them, then they're no one because I'm always on LinkedIn. And I sent them a link to that person's profile, and they both had in different Zoom calls, they both had an identical reaction. They were like, "Oh my God, 35,000 followers. How do I not know them?" They saw the follower count, and their first impression of that person instantly changed. And these friends of mine, they were both business people. They knew what can and cannot hide behind a huge social media following. They knew that while your knee-jerk reflex is to say, "Hey, if 35,000 people follow this person, they can't all be wrong." The truth is that they can be wrong. Large crowds are known to be wrong. Also, that followers can be bought, or not necessarily through engagement pods or ads or anything like that. But the easiest way to buy them is through super shallow motivational content that satisfies that itch we all have, but really has no substance and no depth. But the truth is that overall, a big social media following acts as social proof. People see that and they say, "Hey, this person knows what they're talking about." If you have 200 followers, people are going to be very reticent in buying from you. I remember that one of my first solopreneur clients, they wanted to launch a high ticket offer and they had exactly 200 followers on LinkedIn. And I tried to convince them, this is not the way to go because you don't have enough trust built on that platform. It's your main channel, and people see 200 followers and they say they're just getting started. I will not buy from them. I will not spend four figures on someone who's just getting started. So, because I said I think of this in terms of loops, obviously, deplatform people off of social media, but also in your emails, in your podcast, everywhere, send people to a few of your social media channels because it helps with repetition and reinforcing of your message. Some people may miss your email, but they will see your social media post. I've had countless comments when I resurfaced my newsletters saying that, hey, I didn't get a chance to read this yet, but I'm going to read it here because some of my subscribers are also social media followers. Um, and also because it gives you a chance to stay top of mind more. And they say normalcy is what you see repeatedly. If you always see the same name pop up in your feeds, in your inbox, everywhere, you're going to associate that person with an expert in their field. And when you're ready to buy something to solve an existing challenge, you're going to think of them first.
So it's almost about like building that salience in your audience's mind and showing up in different contexts, in different channels, and using that more than just building an audience for audience sake. So I think what
Yeah.
you're saying is very important. So that's why I'm trying to paraphrase to sort of bring that to the attention of people. It's not about just being there at the mercy of an algorithm and trying to build an audience to stay present there. It's about using that audience growth as a growth mechanism for other uh, parts of your marketing system that are more closely linked to actual revenue, which is
Yeah.
getting people on platforms where you have more control, like a newsletter, and then also using that visibility on social media as social proof to actually get people to get interested in the offers that you're trying to sell. So
Yeah.
these
To get
are
attention.
both very different from what we most often hear or think about when we're thinking about presence on social media. It's always about like reach and impressions and so on. And what you're saying is markedly different and in very important ways.
Yeah, because I try to think of ways to simplify this content journey. We all want to make more, whether it's content or money, with less time. And of course, there are a ton of limits to that, but there are things you can do. And being on multiple channels, while it may seem exhausting, especially if you don't have a repurposing system in place, is one of the best things you can do to enhance your visibility, because this is one of those very, very few places where social media algorithms and cookies work in your favor. For instance, if you watch an Instagram reel from a creator and then you open Facebook or YouTube, the cookies that are on your device will tell the next social media platform that you like that creator, and they're going to serve you more content from them and more and so on. And at some point you get the impression that that person is everywhere, even though maybe they're not. Maybe you move from Instagram into YouTube where they have exactly two videos, but the algorithm showed you one of them because they want to keep you engaged.
Yeah. No, that's actually a great point. Using those little algorithm intricacies to our advantage rather than just trying to fight them and survive instead of that. Um, I definitely don't want to miss the opportunity of speaking with you about newsletters because you have an amazing newsletters, Strategic AF, and I really love the fact that you're putting so much time and effort into creating like valuable content there, and I'm pretty sure that it's bringing the results that you need from it. Otherwise, you being the strategic marketer that you are, you would have sort of abandoned that long ago. So I want to talk about newsletters. First, a quick reminder, you guys watching us both on YouTube and on LinkedIn, if you have any questions for Adriana, share them in the chat. I'm gonna surface them and we're gonna talk about this in the last now 20-ish minutes of this session. But I first want to get your take on newsletters, and let's sort of kick this off by saying like, why are you so bullish on newsletters? Why do you think that this is the most, like you mentioned earlier that this is the best content that you create, so investing so much time in that, obviously, like, talk to us a little bit more about that.
Oh, this is super easy because it's where the money's at. So I told you that most of my clients say I found you on social media but bought from you because of your newsletters. it's not just that you have room for more depth and more substance in a newsletter rather than in a social media post, but it's also more of an intimate space. When you look at the different places you can build an audience in, I see it this way. On social media, you have the follow button. I think it's the cheapest kind of engagement. People follow you, but they know that with the For You algorithms, they may never see your content again, even if they're following you. Then you have the subscribe button, which either gives them a notification on YouTube or sends them an email if they subscribe to your email list. And lastly, you have the pay button, which is the best form of engagement and the most trust someone can put in you. They're not just trusting you with their time, but also with their money. And the shortest route to get to money is with email, and it goes through a subscribe, not a follow button. Now, I know there are a lot of people who make money off social media alone, but they're typically closer to the influencer model rather than the solopreneur or expert led business model. So, as I said, there's nuance everywhere. But this is why I'm bullish on newsletters. I know they work. I know there's also a big hype around newsletter. Everyone and their dog has a newsletter right now, which is why the space has gotten more crowded and harder um, to grow in. But that doesn't mean it has lost its effectiveness.
Yeah, and I agree on all counts. I think newsletter engagement and building an engaged audience through a newsletter is the most worthwhile way of growing your audience that you can focus on. And I love to talk a little bit about. So you just said this, like everyone and their dog now has a newsletter. So how do you choose, like if you're someone just starting out and figuring out what should this newsletter be about, how am I gonna stand out from others, how do you think about choosing topics and building that differentiator for your newsletter? Do you have to have like a very specific type of premise? Do you think it's more about the quality of the ideas you're sharing? What's the process of getting to a newsletter that actually gets attention and gets read?
I just surfaced an older newsletter issue. Speaking of repurposing, I want to drop it in the chat. It's something I call the big idea, and it's something that should be at the root of, I would say, your business. But if not your business, then at least your main channel, the main place where you create content. And I know a lot of people talk about niching down and finding that minimum viable audience that you can serve. I think the best decision long term is to find a big idea, because this is what people rally around. I did this in a workshop. I talked about big ideas as the core of any newsletter, and let's start at the top. So, a big idea is usually a for against statement. For instance, in my case, I'm for strategic planning and against hacks. This is you naming your villain, but also naming the hill you're willing to die on. And they are usually for and against statements, because vanilla doesn't convert, and you need to tell people what you won't be talking about. I'm going to give you a few examples. For instance, you may know Caitlin Bourgogne, who writes the Why We Buy newsletter. She talks about buyer psychology, not growth hacks. Justin Welsh talks about solopreneurship instead of 9 to 5 jobs. And you may or may not agree with what they stand for, but at least it's very clear. What they do is very, very clear. So I know that the newsletters that do succeed have a big idea behind them. They're not just another marketing newsletter that shares tips. They're not just another fitness newsletter, a newsletter, and so on. Now, the way to find your big idea is to start by asking, what do I believe and what do most people in my space get wrong? I'm willing to bet that anyone who ever started a business started it, well, obviously to make money, but also because they identified a gap in the market, a segment that's not as well served as it could be, or a way to do things better than most people do it. You can always start there, and start building your big idea upon that. And this is where things get a bit bolder, if you will. What's something that you wish people would finally say out loud, something that people are whispering in private communities, but on the surface everyone agrees with the wrong thing? In my case, this was that hacks don't work and that bro marketers should not be paid with your hard-earned money, because they will not help you pad your bottom line. And this is what I started saying. I got a bit of hate out of that, but it's not my first time on the internet, so I'm okay with it. And then lastly, if you already started creating content, but you feel like there isn't a red thread that ties everything together, a big idea, you need to start looking for recurring themes in your content, in your rants, or in your client calls. Your client calls are actually a very, very good source for pretty much everything from identifying your big idea to your next piece of content, because oftentimes your clients are able to articulate what you do and what you do well, what you do better than other people than you are. Um, at the end of the day, you should have a bold, a visceral statement that can serve as the summary of your newsletter. You should subscribe to my newsletter because I rotate between a few of these statements. I tell people that it's the only marketing newsletter that doesn't treat founders like toddlers, and doesn't disrespect their intelligence. And also, I tell them that, what else do I say? I say learn how to build a business strategically, not through hacks, and all of them tie back to my big idea. This is what I talk about. If you're looking for hacks, if you're looking for how to make your next $1 million by tomorrow, I'm not the person to teach you that.
Awesome. And talking about ideas and how do you build that content, we have a question on LinkedIn that sort of ties to that, goes beyond newsletters, but still. The question is about, like, when you want to educate consumers, how do you go about grabbing their attention? Um, if I have to expand on that, and I'm sort of putting words in the mouth of the person who has this, but I think I can sort of feel where they're coming from. I often feel like, okay, like there's a topic that I want to be talking about. I know that it's important for people to know this in order to be interested in the type of marketing that I'm doing and the type of services that I'm providing. But at the same time, how do I make sure that uh, I'm building this message in a way that's uh, attracting the attention of those people in a way that resonates with them? So how do you usually think about educating people and telling them things that they might not necessarily be ready to hear about?
Um, I call this chocolate covered broccoli. Like, uh, typically, I shy away from educating people because that's very close to trying to generate demand, and that's either a losing battle or it takes too long. Ideally, you want to go where demand is. You want to go solving problems people are already aware that they have. This is why we're talking about content today, because we know people struggle with content systems and with producing enough content quantity wise, but also content that converts and brings in revenue. We know there is demand for this. We didn't try to generate that, right? Um, but I know there are deeply rooted ideas in people's minds that may be wrong from an expert's point of view. So this is chocolate covered broccoli. This is where you tell people that, hey, you can produce content, you can do it at scale. This is the chocolate part. And then there's the broccoli part. You need to work on your foundation first. And this is going to take time. It's going to make things easier in the future. You're going to spend less and less time creating every content asset. But in the beginning, you're going to have to swallow that broccoli before before getting to the sweet chocolatey part. Uh, but again, educating people is never quick, and that's presuming that it works. For example, I worked with a lot of people in a lot of companies in cybersecurity, and this is where education is important because people aren't aware of the risks that they face simply by being online. And we created a lot of content for them. But at some point, we switched between trying to tell other companies that you need to up your security because this is what can happen to you. And we started going directly after the people who had already gone through a cyber attack and they knew they needed to improve their security. This was a much, much shorter and much easier sales cycle. But we kept the education part as a way to create brand awareness and as a way to position the company as someone who knows what they're talking about in cybersecurity. And if you look at what we're doing, I'm not trying to necessarily educate people and tell them that you need what I'm selling. I'm talking to people who already know that. I'm telling them what they need to do through my newsletter, through every piece of content that I create, and then they can decide whether that is for them or not, and whether they want to work with me, or they can DIY everything based on the content they consume.
Yeah. For a second there, I was like, "Oh, is she going about demand gen as a whole, as a concept, which is sort of a bold take?" And I would expect nothing less from you, frankly. But I see now that it's more about using these different systems for different purposes, to different effects, because demand creation is more about building that public image and expanding your sphere of influence, while demand nurturing and capturing that existing demand is about getting the revenue in and having that sustained profit that can keep your business in business longer. So
Yeah.
that's an interesting distinction here.
I think our mutual friend Louis Grenier would tell us that demand generation is bullshit and you can't make people want stuff that they don't want. And I agree with him. This is why I'm skeptical on educational content as a means to generate sales. It depends on what you understand by education.
Yeah. No, yeah, I definitely agree with that take. It takes a lot of time. It's similar to when I hear some of the people who come to me for projects and they're like, "We're gonna be inventing a new category," and I'm like, "Do you have a couple of billion lying around? Because that's what you need in order to create a new category that people are aware of." Like, there's very few examples of companies that have succeeded in that, and all over it's about spending the big money, and if you're just
Yeah.
like a new startup coming to the scene, you're not going to be able to do that. So it's
And
similar in that sense.
there are even more examples of people who try to do this. They spend the billions and they have nothing to show for it.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's for sure. I want to spend these last couple of minutes to sort of bring us back to the start. We started talking about the state of solopreneurship report that you created, and I think that this is a great example of creating that type of signature content that really signals that you're in the know and you're the expert to follow in a particular niche. So I wanted to talk about it more from the perspective of uh, how do you think about original research as a content marketing strategy rather than the results of that report for yourself, for, for yourself and for your business? So if we're looking at that, like what was the process? If you can take us back in the day when you were first thinking about this, like why did you decide? I'm pretty sure that you knew that it's going to be an uphill battle, even if you didn't know exactly how much time it's going to take. But what was the reasoning about investing time and effort into original research?
So, first and foremost, I did it because I was annoyed at at the existing reports that usually conflate content creators, influencers, solopreneurs, small businesses, people like Alex Hormozy or Cody Sanchez that have teams of 100 plus people.
Yeah.
And essentially, we all end up benchmarking our business against Mr. Beast. And that's a losing battle because that's not what we do. And we should not be doing that. So I wanted to ask people like us how they viewed this. And I decided it was an effort worth doing because there was another question that I kept battling with, and I'm sure this is true for most of us. How do you stand out among so much AI slop? And it's not just getting on your high horse and saying, hey, my content is good, it's not AI slop. It may be good, but among these crowded feeds, it's super hard for people to even see it, let alone consume it. And I began brainstorming types of content that AI couldn't touch. This is one of them. This is one of those hard things that very few people are willing to do, and when you do it, you stand out. And yeah, that was my reasoning.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I've participated in a few projects that involved original research and report creation. And I have to say, every time it's ridiculously fucking difficult to get to the level of quality of the research that you're creating that will speak nicely for you as an expert and will actually be worth someone's time and attention. But when you actually manage to do it, the upside can be great, both for corporate brands. Like an example I can give is I was working with a recruitment platform, sort of a marketplace between talent acquisition experts and job seekers, and they did very detailed salary research that we published, and it brought in like massive upside in both visibility and attention and backlinks and all of the sweet stuff from a content marketer perspective, but also in the attention from the right type of people and from prospects who then became customers of the platform, which is like what we are all sort of trying to do. Um, and then
Absolutely.
there's also the side for people like us who are more on the consulting side. Maybe it's about the type of research that you did, which is more quantitative. Maybe it's about focusing on summarizing trends and being more forward looking, which is a project I used to work on with a marketing and branding agency back in the day, where we again sort of took it from a different perspective, where we were interviewing people and looking for patterns between different experts in the field that they were focused on, and then summarizing that and bringing all of this information together. But at the end of the day, it's about surfacing information that's going to be valuable for the particular type of person that can be your client. So it needs to be very, very
Yeah.
nicely targeted at the right type of person. And I think what you did was very smart, because this is at the end of the day the type of client you also work with, and giving us the tools and information for that also positions you as the experts who knows that industry inside out. So
Yeah. I know
after
it's hard to
gushing out
replicate,
about that,
so just
yeah, I wanted to sort of get to a more specific question, which is about I see that you had a very strong why, so I'm assuming that you wanted to do this project whether or not, like, you were sort of treating it as an experiment, is what I'm hearing you say.
yeah.
Like, you wanted to do it, you decided to do it. So how are you measuring results currently? Like, what's most important for you to see as success metrics to figure out if you're gonna do like a follow-up edition next year?
I'm looking at both quality and quantity. For instance, I started paying attention from the moment the first people saw it, and I wanted to get their feedback. The fact that I got a ton of email replies and DMs telling me that, wow, this stat is surprising, or I didn't expect to see this, or I love that you added strategic AF insight after every chart to sort of explain what this means and put it into context. As a side note, this was my way of injecting a bit of personality into an otherwise dry report with numbers and and charts.
Yeah.
Um, this was um, quality part, but then there's the quantity part, which in which I measure how many new subscribers I get and whether I can directly tie revenue to this report or not. So this is, I think this is the type of content, original research is the type of content that builds an audience first and foremost, grows your audience, and then it's up to you how you decide to convert that newly built bit of audience that you gain from it. So these are my metrics. This is why I did it. Of course, there's all that backlinking and referencing and social media tags and all that in the background, but I think they can all be bundled into audience growth and, yes, authority building.
Yeah. Okay. I'm hearing something very important here, so I'm gonna take a second to paraphrase before I let you go and we close this off. You mentioned both types of metrics. You're talking about both qualitative results, so number of backlinks, the reach you're getting, the number of downloads, all that good stuff. But also the first thing I think you mentioned was getting the email replies and getting personal feedback from people and hearing from them that this is net new information that they're getting that surprised them and that they can't get anywhere else. And I think this is sort of the proper way of looking at what this type of content marketing initiative brings. It's really about giving people the tools to come to their own decisions, and you are there as the solution, the logical solution to the decision that they're going to make, which is sort of a very, very smart way to leverage content.
Yeah, I know it's rather difficult to apply this to every industry. It's hard to go meta. Like, I'm a solopreneur, I work with solopreneurs, so it was a natural choice for me. It can't be easily replicated, but if you can do it, if you have the right topic at hand, do it. Invest the time. It's worth it.
Yeah, I think that's a good note to end on, because people will now start thinking about their implementing original research into their content system for 2026, and I want to leave them the time to properly plan for this. So this is where we can end this. Adriana, thank you so much for doing this and for sharing so much of your process and behind the scenes. I know a lot of the things that we were talking about and the questions I asked are usually reserved for clients that come to you for paid projects. So I'm very grateful for you sharing that expertise. And I guess the place where we can direct people would be your website, adrianatica.com, and your newsletter, Strategic AF. We're waiting for the next edition tomorrow with bated breath. At least I am, for sure. So we'll see how it.
Thank you, Vasi. Thank you. This was great.
Yeah, and to everyone watching, thanks so much for joining us, and see you around in the next one. I'm already preparing a January session on a topic that I personally know very, very little about, and we're going to be talking about TikTok. So this is going to be
Ooh,
super, super interesting. So
I need to watch
I'm
that.
putting the final touches to this session, and I'll announce it in a few days' time.